I flew to Los Angeles without warning, dreaming of a joyful reunion, but found my daughter dying alone in intensive care. Meanwhile, her husband was partying on a luxury yacht, spending my money on champagne and entertainment. Enraged by his betrayal, I left him penniless. An hour later, he lost his mind, and that was just the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I pulled out my phone as the plane began its descent into LAX, fingers trembling slightly as I typed, landing in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. This will be the best surprise of her life. The send button felt like a promise I was about to keep. 3 years, too long. The photograph in my wallet had become soft at the edges from handling. Matilda laughing in her kitchen, Flower dusting her dark hair, Emma missing her front tooth grinning beside her, little Jack holding up a crayon masterpiece. I'd looked at it every day since Martha died. But today felt different. Today I was finally doing something about the ache in my chest. Folks, we're beginning our final approach into Los Angeles International Airport. My weathered hands gripped the armrests as familiar anticipation coursed through me. The last time I'd surprised anyone was Martha's 50th birthday. That seems like another lifetime now. 5 years of grief had turned me into a stranger, even to my own daughter. But Matilda's voice during our last call 3 months ago kept echoing, "I'm just tired, Dad. Really tired." Something in her tone had stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. The baggage carousel hummed steadily as I waited, watching other families reunite around me. A young mother swept a toddler into her arms. An elderly couple embraced their son. Soon that would be me and Matilda, except she didn't know I was coming. "Studio City, please." I settled into the Uber, showing the driver the address on my phone. "Going to see my daughter. She doesn't know I'm coming." "Surprise visits are the best," he replied in accented English, pulling into LAX traffic. "My family in Guatemala, they love when I show up unexpected." The freeway stretched endlessly ahead, palm trees swaying in the April afternoon breeze. LA looked exactly as I remembered from my last visit. Sprawling, sun-soaked, nothing like the small Texas town where I'd raised Matilda. She'd always been drawn to bigger things, brighter lights. Martha used to say our daughter got her adventurous spirit from me, back when I still believed in taking risks. I tried calling Matilda twice during the drive, finger hovering over her contact, then hanging up before it could ring. No? Better to surprise her in person. The look on her face would be worth the 4-hour flight and my aching back. "This the place?" The driver pulled up to a neat house with white shutters and a small front garden. "Perfect." I handed him cash, grabbed my overnight bag, and stood on the sidewalk as he drove away. The afternoon sun felt warm on my shoulders as I walked toward the front door, rehearsing what I'd say. Maybe I'd start with a joke about her old dad finally figuring out how to use airline booking websites. Or perhaps I'd just open my arms and wait for her to run into them like she used to when she was 8. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small gift I'd brought, a hand-carved wooden jewelry box I'd made in my garage workshop. Something to keep her grandmother's ring safe until Emma was old enough. Martha would have loved seeing it passed down. The doorbell waited under my finger, and for a moment, I just stood there savoring the anticipation. 3 years of phone calls and text messages were about to become real hugs and shared meals and stories told face to face. I pressed the button and heard the familiar chime echo inside. Then, silence. I pressed the doorbell again, holding it longer this time. The chime rang through what sounded like an empty house, followed by that same hollow quiet. "Matilda, it's Dad," I called out, knocking on the doorframe. Maybe they were in the backyard or upstairs with music playing. Kids could be loud. Perhaps they simply hadn't heard. The silence stretched on. I stepped back and looked at the house properly for the first time. The rosebush by the front window had turned brown at the edges. Petals scattered across the walkway like discarded confetti. When had Matilda stopped tending her garden? She used to send me photos of her roses every spring. Walking around to the side gate, I peered through the slats into the backyard. Empty patio furniture sat covered in a fine layer of dust, and the small vegetable patch she'd been so proud of had withered to brown stems. A child's tricycle lay on its side near the back door, one wheel still spinning lazily in the breeze. "Strange," I muttered, returning to the front porch. The mailbox overflowed with envelopes and packages, some spilling onto the ground. I picked up a few pieces. Electric bills from 3 weeks ago, advertising circulars, a package addressed to Gary that looked like it had been sitting in the California sun for days. The latest postmark I could see was from 10 days ago. My heart began beating faster, that familiar engineer's instinct kicking in. When systems fail, there's always a logical explanation. I just needed to gather more data. I cupped my hands against the living room window, pressing my face to the glass. Dark inside, curtains drawn, no movement, no television flickering, no sounds of family life. The house felt abandoned, though I could make out familiar shapes. Matilda's art easel in the corner, Jack's toy cars scattered on the coffee table. "Excuse me, are you looking for the McCoys?" I spun around to see an elderly woman in a sun hat approaching from the house next door, garden shears in her gloved hands. "Yes, I'm Harley Sims, Matilda's father. Have you seen them lately?" She paused, wetting her forehead with the back of her wrist. "Come to think of it, no. Been awfully quiet over there. Usually hear the children playing in the morning." But she trailed off, studying my face. "Is everything all right?" "I'm sure it is." But my voice sounded unconvincing even to me. They probably went on vacation, maybe visiting family. She didn't look convinced either. "Well, I hope they're okay. Such a sweet family." As she returned to her gardening, I sat heavily on Matilda's front step, the wooden jewelry box still clutched in my hands. The pieces weren't fitting together. Matilda would have mentioned a vacation during our last call. Gary was obsessed with social media. He would have posted photos from wherever they'd gone. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Matilda's Facebook page. The last post was 6 weeks ago. A photo of Emma's school art project. Before that, radio silence for nearly 2 months. My daughter, who used to document every family dinner and weekend adventure, had gone completely quiet. The afternoon shadows grew longer as I sat there, staring at the silent house. A jogger ran past, earbuds in, completely absorbed in her own world. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower started up, the sound normal and reassuring, and entirely at odds with the growing dread in my chest. I checked under the welcome mat, then felt around the rim of the flower pot by the door. No hidden key. The front door handle turned uselessly in my grip, locked, of course. "Okay, Harley," I said aloud, trying to study my nerves. "Don't panic. There's a logical explanation." But as I sat on that porch step, surrounded by signs of abandonment and neglect, I couldn't shake the feeling that my surprise visit had revealed something much worse than an empty house. Time to call Matilda. My thumb hovered over Matilda's contact for a moment before I pressed it, listening to the dial tone with growing anxiety. 1 ring, 2, 3, straight to voice B to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Matilda. Leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." Her cheerful recorded voice made my chest tighten. I hung up and immediately dialed again. Same result. Voicemail after 4 rings. Either her phone was dead or she was deliberately not answering. Third time, I let it ring longer, determined to leave a message if nothing else. Hello. The voice that answered wasn't Matilda's. Male, professional, cautious. Matilda, this is Dad. I'm in Los Angeles. I wanted to surprise you, but nobody's home. And sir, this is Dr. Rivera from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Are you a family member of Matilda McCoy? The world tilted sideways. I gripped the phone tighter, my other hand pressing against the porch railing for support. What? Yes, I'm her father. Why do you have her phone? Where is she? A pause that lasted forever. Mr. Sims, I'm very sorry to inform you that your daughter is currently in our intensive care unit. She's been receiving treatment for advanced cancer and her condition is critical. The words hit me like physical blows. Cancer. Critical. My vision blurred at the edges. That's impossible. My voice came out strangled. I talked to her 3 months ago. She was fine. She was just tired from chasing the kids around. Sir, I understand this is shocking news. Stage 4 cancer can progress rapidly, and patients often don't share their diagnosis with family members immediately. She's been under our care for several weeks now. Several weeks. The neglected garden, the overflowing mailbox, the silent house. It all clicked into place with horrible clarity. Where's Gary? Her husband. Where are my grandchildren? Another pause. I cannot comment on other family matters, Mr. Sims. Patient confidentiality prevents me from sharing details. But I strongly recommend you come to the hospital immediately. Your daughter has been asking for you. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. What's the address? I'm coming now. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, 8700 Beverly Boulevard. Ask for the Oncology Intensive Care Unit when you arrive. Dr. Rivera. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my trembling hands. The afternoon sun suddenly too bright, too warm, too normal for a world where my daughter was dying, and I hadn't known. 3 months ago, she'd said she was tired, and I'd been so wrapped up in my own grief, my own isolation, that I'd missed every warning sign. The wooden jewelry box fell from my lap, clattering on the porch steps. Martha's ring was supposed to pass to Emma someday. But what if there wasn't going to be a someday? What if I was too late? I stood up too quickly, head spinning, and stumbled toward the street with mechanical precision. A taxi. I needed a taxi. The hospital address burned in my mind. 8700 Beverly Boulevard, Oncology Intensive Care Unit. As I flagged down a yellow cab, one thought kept circling through my shock. How had I become the kind of father who finds out his daughter is dying from a stranger on the phone? The taxi door slammed shut with a finality that seemed to seal my old life away. I handed the driver the crumpled paper with the hospital address, my hands still trembling from shock. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, please. Fast as you can. Traffic's heavy this time of day, sir. But I'll do my best. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, noting my distress. Emergency. My daughter. The words stuck in my throat. She's dying. The leather seat beneath me felt foreign, too smooth, too normal for someone whose world had just collapsed. Through the window, LA traffic moved in its usual chaotic dance. People heading home from work, picking up groceries, living ordinary lives, while mine spiraled into nightmare. Cancer, stage 4, critical. I pulled out that worn photograph again, studying Matilda's laughing face. How had I missed the signs? That last phone call replayed an endless loop. Just tired, Dad. Really tired. The way she'd said it, like she was carrying some invisible weight. I'd attributed it to motherhood, work stress, the normal exhaustion of raising 2 kids. What kind of father was I? The taxi lurched forward in stop-and-go traffic, and memories flooded in unbitten. Matilda taking her first wobbly steps toward me across our old kitchen floor, arms outstretched, absolute trust in her eyes. Teaching her to ride a bike in the park behind our house, running alongside until I realized she'd been pedaling solo for 50 yards. Her high school graduation, that proud smile as she accepted her diploma, walking her down the aisle 2 years ago. Gary had promised to love and protect her. "I'll take care of your daughter, sir," he'd said, shaking my hand with that confident grip. Where was he now? Why hadn't he called me when she got sick? I dialed Gary's number for the 4th time, straight to voicemail again. "Gary, this is Harley. I'm in LA. Matilda's in the hospital and you need to call me immediately." The message felt inadequate, too polite for the rage building in my chest. My daughter was fighting for her life and her husband was nowhere to be found. "Faster, please," I told the driver. "She's only 38, has 2 little kids." "So young," he murmured, accelerating through a yellow light. "I have daughter, too. Same age. This breaks the heart." Through the window, palm trees swayed against the afternoon sky, indifferent to human suffering. Martha used to say, La looked like paradise but felt lonely. She'd been right about that, just like she'd been right about so many things. If Martha were alive, she would have known about Matilda's illness. Mothers had that intuition, that invisible connection. She would have sensed something was wrong during those phone calls, would have pressed for details, maybe even flown out here herself. But Martha was gone, and I'd spent 5 years drowning in my own grief, instead of being the father my daughter needed. I folded and refolded the hospital address, creasing it into a small square. The paper felt substantial, real, the only solid thing in a day that had become surreal. This morning, I'd been a retired engineer planning a surprise visit. Now I was racing through LA traffic to see my dying daughter. The taxi pulled up to the hospital entrance just as evening began to paint the sky purple. Modern glass and steel rose before me, imposing and clinical. Through the windows I could see people moving purposefully through bright corridors, doctors, nurses, families dealing with their own crisis. "Here we are, sir." The driver's voice was gentle. "Good luck with your daughter." I handed him cash with shaking hands, grabbed my overnight bag, and stood on the sidewalk as he pulled away. The automatic doors whispered open, revealing a modern lobby adorned with colorful art installations that seemed obscenely cheerful. I approached the information desk where a kind-faced woman looked up expectantly. "Oncology intensive care unit, yay," I managed. "My daughter, Matilda McCoy. ID, please, and I'll need you to sign in." She handed me a visitor badge and clipboard. "Take the elevator to the 7th floor." My hands shook as I wrote my name. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor number lighting up like a countdown to devastation. When the doors opened, the antiseptic smell hit me immediately, that unique hospital mixture of cleaning supplies and human suffering. Dr. Rivera waited at the nurse's station, a compact man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He extended his hand as I approached. "Mr. Sims, I'm glad you made it safely. How is she?" The question came out hoarse-aro. "Stable for now. The chemotherapy hasn't been as effective as we'd hoped, but she's responding to the current treatment protocol." He gestured down the hallway. "She's been asking for family. She'll be relieved you're here." We walked past rooms filled with the soft beeping of machines and hushed conversations. Through one doorway, I glimpsed an elderly man holding his wife's hand. Through another, a young mother reading to a child with a bald head. "Room 712, Dr. Rivera said softly. "I should warn you, the illness has taken a physical toll, but mentally, emotionally, she's still very much herself. Nothing could have prepared me." Matilda lay propped up in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that tracked her heartbeat in steady green lines, IV tubes snaked from her arms to bags of clear fluid hanging on metal poles. She looked so small, so fragile, a shadow of the vibrant woman who danced at her wedding. But when she saw me, her face transformed with the most beautiful smile. "Daddy." The word came out as a whisper, but it hit me like a freight train. I crossed the room in 3 steps and carefully gathered her into my arms, afraid I might break her. She felt bird-like, all sharp angles where there used to be soft curves. Oh, sweetheart. Tears I'd been holding back since the phone call finally spilled over. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "I didn't want to worry you," she breathed against my shoulder. "You were still grieving, Mom, and I thought I could handle it myself." I pulled back to look at her face, smoothing the thin hospital blanket around her shoulders, the same way I used to tuck her in when monsters lived under her bed. "Why didn't you tell me? We could have fought this together." Her eyes filled with tears. "The doctor said 6 months, maybe 8, with treatment. I kept thinking I'd get better, that I'd call you when I was in remission, when I had good news to share." 8 months, maybe less now. I settled into the chair beside her bed, taking her hand in both of mine. Her fingers were ice cold, despite the warm room. "Where's Gary?" I tried to keep my voice neutral, but she must have heard something because her expression shifted. "He said he had important business meetings this week." She looked away toward the window, said he'd be back before the weekend. "When did you last see him?" 3 days ago." The words came out small, ashamed. "He's been distant since the diagnosis. I think it scares him." Scares him. My daughter was dying and her husband was scared. "Has he been taking care of you? Helping with the kids?" "My neighbor Emma watches them during the day. Gary handles the practical stuff." But the way she said it, like she was trying to convince herself, told me everything I needed to know. I spent the next hour just being present, holding her hand while she drifted in and out of sleep. Each time she woke, her eyes found mine immediately, as if making sure I was still real. As evening deepened outside the window, she finally fell into deeper sleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. I gently released her hand and moved to the window, looking out over the city lights, beginning to twinkle like fallen stars. Time to try Gary again. I pulled out my phone, Gary's contact glowing on the screen. This time I'd make him answer, make him explain where he'd been while his wife fought for her life. First call, 1 ring, then voicemail. He was definitely screening. I typed a text message. "Your wife is in ICU. Call immediately." 5 minutes passed. Nothing. Second attempt from my phone yielded the same result. But then I noticed Matilda's phone on the bedside table, plugged into the wall charger. Maybe if the call came from her number. I glanced back at her sleeping form, then carefully picked up her phone. Gary's contact appeared in her recent calls, but the last incoming call was from 2 days ago. 2 days since he'd bothered to check on his dying wife. Third call attempt, using Matilda's phone. Straight to voicemail again. Frustrated, I nearly set the phone down when the screen lit up with a notification. Instagram. The app was still open, logged in as Matilda. At the top of the feed, Gary's story appeared with a red circle indicating new content. I tapped it without thinking. The first image made my blood freeze. A luxury yacht deck gleaming in afternoon sunlight. Champagne glasses catching the sun. Someone's manicured hand holding the flute in a toast gesture. The timestamp read 2 hours ago. I swiped to the next story. Gary's face filled the screen, grinning broadly, arms around 2 other men I didn't recognize. All 3 wore expensive sunglasses and looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine ad. Behind them, the Pacific Ocean stretched to infinity. The caption read, "Living my best life with the boys," posted 90 minutes ago. While I was learning, my daughter had cancer. My vision blurred with rage, but I forced myself to continue documenting. Screenshot after screenshot, each image a dagger twisted deeper. Gary lounging on pristine white cushions. Gary diving off the yacht's diving platform. Gary raising another champagne glass as sunset painted the sky orange. The final story video showed him addressing the camera directly. Nothing like a few days away from reality to clear your head. You know, sometimes you just got to live a little away from reality. His wife was connected to machines, and he was talking about getting away from reality. I checked the location tags. Marina del Rey, less than an hour from this hospital. My hands shook as I typed another message. I see you're having fun. Your wife is dying. Call me. Then another. I have screenshots. We need to talk. Still no response. I paced the small room quietly, trying not to wake Matilda, my mind racing through implications. I was only beginning to understand that yacht rental had to cost thousands per day. Gary was a business consultant. Successful, but not yacht rental for fun. Successful. Where was the money coming from? Looking back at Matilda's peaceful face, I whispered promises I should have made months ago. I won't let him hurt you anymore, sweetheart. Daddy's here now, and I'm going to fix this. The monitor beside her bed beeped steadily, each tone marking another heartbeat, another moment of life that Gary was wasting while partying with friends. How long had this been going on? How long had she been suffering alone while he played at being single? I returned to the phone, screenshotting everything methodically. The engineering part of my brain took over. Document the evidence, build the case, find the leverage points. Gary might think he could abandon my daughter in her darkest hour, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd forgotten that Matilda had a father who would burn the world down to protect her. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Gary's name appeared on the screen. I looked at Matilda one more time. Her thin face finally relaxed in sleep, then stepped into the hallway. Time to have a conversation. I slipped back into Matilda's room where she lay sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady against the backdrop of monitoring beeps. "I'll be right back, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "Just going to get some coffee." The elevator carried me down to the main floor, past signs directing visitors to various departments. The cafeteria occupied a corner of the ground level, mostly empty now, except for a few scattered medical staff grabbing late meals between shifts. I bought coffee I didn't want and found a quiet table in the far corner, pulling out my phone to stare at that yacht photo again. The image burned brighter each time I looked at it. Gary's carefree grin, the pristine deck, champagne glasses catching afternoon sunlight. How does a business consultant afford a $15,000 yacht rental? The question triggered a memory that made my blood run cold. 1 year ago, Gary had approached me about family emergencies, medical bills, he'd claimed. Emma needed dental work. The house required repairs. Could I help them out temporarily by giving him access to my backup account? Just until things stabilize, he'd promised. Matilda doesn't need the stress of financial worry on top of everything else. I'd been impressed by his consideration for my daughter's well-being. What a caring husband, I'd thought, protecting his wife from money concerns. My hands shook as I opened my banking app, navigating to the shared account I'd set up for Gary's emergency access. The transaction history loaded slowly, each entry appearing like evidence in a murder trial. Marina del Rey, Yacht charters, $15,000, posted yesterday. New Malibu, $850, 3 days ago. Beverly Hills Mercedes service, $2,400 last week. Rodeo Drive shopping, $3,200 10 days ago. The list went on and on. A months-long pattern of luxury 7 spending while my daughter wasted away in a hospital bed. Every dollar he'd blown on champagne and yacht parties had come from my account. Every designer purchase, every expensive dinner, every moment of his freedom had been funded by the father of the wife he'd abandoned. I screenshot every transaction, my engineer's mind methodically building a case. The dates told the story. As Matilda's condition worsened, Gary's spending increased. While she was receiving her first rounds of chemotherapy, he was shopping on Rodeo Drive. While she was losing her hair to treatment, he was dining at 5-star restaurants. The parasitic son of awe. I stopped myself before the anger could fully consume my thinking. Rage was useful, but cold calculation would serve Matilda better. I pulled out a small notebook and began writing down key information, account numbers, transaction IDs, a systematic approach to cutting off Gary's financial lifeline. He'd made one crucial mistake. He'd used my money to finance his betrayal. Time to show him what happens when you cross a Texas engineer who spent 40 years solving complex problems. The hospital cafeteria hummed quietly around me. Vending machines, distant overhead pages, the soft murmur of exhausted medical staff. But I was no longer really there. My mind was in full strategic mode, identifying vulnerabilities and planning countermoves. Gary thought he could party his way through his wife's terminal illness on my dime. He was about to learn that every action has consequences, and some consequences arrive with mathematical precision. I finished my cold coffee and stood up, pocketing the notebook with bank information. First step, immediate financial amputation. Cut off his access completely before he could spend another cent of my money. Second step would be more personal. I found a quiet alcove near the hospital chapel, settling into a wooden chair with my phone and notebook spread before me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Planning financial warfare steps away from a place of sanctuary I had no intention of seeking. The bank's emergency line answered on the 3rd ring. First National Emergency Services, this is Amanda speaking. How can I help you tonight? This is Harley Sims, account holder. I need to revoke authorized access on my accounts immediately. I kept my voice steady, professional. I'll need to verify your identity first, Mr. Sims. Can you provide your social security number and your mother's maiden name? I rattled off the information while checking my notes. 45 years of banking with the same institution meant they knew my voice, but protocol was protocol. Thank you. I show Gary McCoy has had authorized access to your backup savings account since April 2022. Are you requesting complete revocation of his privileges? Immediate and permanent removal. Transfer all remaining funds to my primary secured account. I need to inform you this action is irreversible and may affect any automated payments or services linked to that account. Are you certain you want to proceed? Cancel everything associated with his access, every automatic payment, every linked service, every recurring charge. Each word came out crisp. Final. One moment, please, while I process these changes. The hold music played while I watched a security guard walk past, nodding respectfully. Normal hospital evening routine continuing while I systematically dismantled Gary's financial foundation. "Mr. Sims, I've revoked Mr. McCoy's access to the savings account and initiated transfer of remaining funds. That's $127,000 moving to your primary account. I'm also showing 3 credit cards with authorized user status in his name. Shall I cancel those as well? $127,000. Gary had been living off my money for 2 years while my daughter suffered in silence. Cancel every card. Remove him as authorized user on all accounts. Delete his contact information from emergency notifications. Processing now." Okay, that's complete. Mr. McCoy will receive notice that his cards have been deactivated and any attempted transactions will be declined. Is there anything else I can do for you tonight? Set up fraud alerts if anyone tries to access these accounts using his information. Already in place, sir. You'll receive confirmation emails within the next few minutes. I hung up and immediately opened my banking app to verify the changes. Account access revoked. Credit cards cancelled. Automatic payments terminated. The digital paper trail showed Gary's financial lifeline had been severed with surgical precision. My phone buzzed with the first confirmation email, then another. Each notification felt like justice delivered in electronic format. Let's see how long the yacht party lasts when his credit cards start getting declined. I closed the notebook with a satisfying snap and pocketed my phone. The engineering part of this problem was solved. Identify the system failure, isolate the problematic component, remove it permanently. Gary's access to my resources now existed only in his own diluted imagination. Standing up from the chair, I felt lighter than I had in hours. Not because the weight of Matilda's illness had lifted. That burden would stay until she recovered, or until she didn't. But the crushing realization that I'd been unknowingly funding her abandonment, that particular torture was over. Gary could keep his yacht for tonight. Tomorrow, when those cards started declining and his calls went unanswered, he'd discover what happens when a parasite loses its host. I walked back toward the elevator, past the chapel door that remained slightly ajar, past the nurses' station where evening shift changes were occurring, normal hospital rhythms continuing, while one small piece of justice had been quietly administered. Matilda was awake when I returned, staring at the ceiling with that distant expression I'd seen too often today. The room glowed softly from monitoring equipment, creating an intimate space separate from the harsh hospital world beyond her door. "Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling?" I sat down my untouched coffee and pulled the chair close to her bedside. "Better now that you're here." She turned toward me and I could see something had shifted while I was gone. "Dad, I need to tell you something about Gary." I took her hand, noting how cold her fingers felt, despite the warm room. "Take your time, honey. I'm here to listen." He changed after Jack was born. Started saying I wasn't contributing enough financially. The words came out slowly, like she was testing each one for safety. The freelance design work got harder when Jack was calicky, and Gary said I was a burden. My free hand clenched into a fist under the hospital blanket, but I kept my voice gentle. "A burden? You're raising 2 children." He said the medical bills were ruining his future plans, that he'd married a partner, not a patient. She looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. When the cancer diagnosis came, he just shut down, started staying out later, making excuses about work meetings. What kind of man abandons his sick wife? I couldn't keep all the anger out of my voice. I kept thinking if I got better quickly, if I didn't complain about the treatment, maybe he'd come back to us, be the father Emma and Jack deserve. Tears started sliding down her cheeks. "But he's not coming back, is he, Dad?" I smoothed her hair back from her forehead the same way I used to when she was 7 and afraid of thunderstorms. "Sweetheart, you are perfect, exactly as you are. Any man who can't see that doesn't deserve you. I feel so stupid for defending him to you all these years, making excuses for why he never called you back, why he was always too busy for family visits." She squeezed my hand with what little strength she had. "You were right about him from the beginning, weren't you? I'd never said a negative word about Gary to her face, but fathers see things wives choose not to notice. I was wrong about one thing. I thought he at least loved you, even if I didn't like him. I never imagined he'd leave you to fight this alone. The worst part is telling Emma why Daddy isn't here anymore. She keeps asking when he's coming home." Matilda's voice broke completely. "How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her father chose his comfort over her mother's life?" A nurse entered quietly to check vitals, giving us a moment's pause. When she left, I leaned closer to Matilda. "You don't have to worry about any of that anymore. Focus on getting better. I'll handle everything else." "Dad, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling you your only job is healing. Leave, Gary. Leave the finances. Leave everything else to me." I kissed her forehead. "You'll never have to deal with his selfishness again." Exhaustion was overtaking her again, the emotional release draining what little energy she had. Her eyelids grew heavy as she fought to stay present. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. Don't let anger at Gary consume you. I need my dad, not another angry man in my life." I covered her with the blanket as her breathing deepened towards sleep. "I promise, sweetheart. Rest now." But as I watched her drift off, I knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. The man who'd sworn to love and protect my daughter had stolen her money, abandoned her in crisis, and broken our grandchildren's hearts. Some acts demand more than forgiveness. They demand consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The phone buzzed insistently in my hand, the unknown number glowing on the screen. Marina del Rey, area code. I glanced at Matilda, peaceful in sleep, then stood quietly and moved toward the window. "Hello?" My voice was ice. "Harley, what did you do?" My cards were declined in front of everyone. Gary's voice cracked with panic and humiliation. "Fix this immediately." "Where are you right now, Gary?" I ignored his demand completely. "That's not your business." "Listen, old man, you need to restore my access right now or my daughter is dying in a hospital bed." Each word dropped like a stone into still water. "And you're partying on a yacht with my money." Silence, then sputtering. "How did you—" "That's not— This is business networking." Through the phone I could hear it all. Party music, laughter, waves lapping against the hull, the sound of a man whose wife was fighting for her life while he lived it up on someone else's dime. $15,000 for yacht rental, Gary. My $15,000. I kept my voice low, aware of Matilda stirring behind me while your wife was in intensive care. "You can't just cut me off. I have rights. I'm her husband." "You were her husband." Past tense. I turned to see Matilda's eyes open, watching me with growing understanding. "You made your choice when you chose champagne over chemotherapy appointments. Listen, you don't understand the pressure I've been under." "The pressure?" My voice hardened. "What pressure, Gary?" "The pressure of having unlimited access to my bank account while abandoning your family." His voice shifted, becoming calculating. "Restore my access or I file for divorce and take the kids. I'll make sure Matilda loses everything in court. That was his mistake the moment he threatened my grandchildren. Gary, I said quietly, and something in my tone made even him pause. You just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic life. Behind me, I heard Matilda's sharp intake of breath. She was fully awake now, listening to every word, finally hearing her husband's true voice. Selfish, threatening, utterly without remorse. I know exactly where you are, I continued. I know exactly what you've been doing. I know exactly how much of my money you've been spending while my daughter fights for her life. And now I know exactly what kind of man threatens to steal children from their dying mother. You can't do this to me. I have a reputation to maintain. People are watching. Yes, they are watching. They're watching you get your credit cards declined because you're a parasite who can't pay his own bills. Gary's voice cracked. Harley, wait. Let's discuss this reasonably. I made some mistakes, but we can work this out. I'll come to the hospital right now. We can... I looked at Matilda, saw the tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief. Finally understanding who she'd married. Finally seeing her father protect her the way a real man protects his family. No, Gary, I said softly. We can't work this out. The silence stretched between us, Gary's panicked breathing audible over the connection. In the background I could hear his world crashing down, yacht engines stopping, voices arguing about payment, the party atmosphere dissolving into chaos. Harley, are you there? Please, I can explain everything. I turned from the window and walked to Matilda's bedside, taking her hand while keeping the phone pressed to my ear, her fingers intertwined with mine, squeezing tight in support. Gary, you chose a yacht over your dying wife. You chose parties over your children. You chose my money over your family's future. My voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but each word cut like a blade. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences. I can change. I'll be... Taras. I'll come home and take care of everyone. If you ever approach my daughter or grandchildren again, I will destroy you completely. Matilda's grip tightened, her eyes wide as she finally heard the protective father she'd needed all along. Financially, legally, socially, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. You can't do this. I have rights. I'm her husband. You abandoned your sick wife for yacht parties. You stole money from her father to fund your selfish lifestyle. You threatened to take children away from their dying mother. I paused, letting each fact sink in. What court do you think will side with you? His voice broke completely. I have nowhere to go. My friends won't even look at me after the card thing. The yacht company is threatening to call the police. I made mistakes, but everyone deserves a second chance. You had your second chance every single day for the past 6 months. Every day you chose not to be here. Every day you chose not to hold her hand during treatment. Every day you chose parties over family. Matilda was crying now, but they were tears of liberation. 20 years of making excuses for Gary's behavior, and now she was hearing her father speak the truth. She'd been too afraid to voice. Please, Harley, I'm begging you. Just give me enough to get home and we can... No. The word hung in the air like a final judgment. You're done, Gary. Done with my money. Done with my family. Done hurting people I love. But I don't have anywhere to. I hung up and immediately blocked his number, the action as final as slamming a door. Then I sat beside Matilda's bed and pulled her hand to my lips, kissing her knuckles the way I used to. She was small and scared. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered. You never have to thank me for protecting you, sweetheart. That's what fathers do. She squeezed my hand tighter. I was so afraid to leave him. afraid of being alone with the kids, afraid of admitting I'd made such a terrible mistake. "You're not alone. You'll never be alone again." I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "And it wasn't your mistake. It was his. Every selfish choice, every cruel word, every moment, he chose himself over his family. That's on him, not you." For the first time since I'd arrived in Los Angeles, Matilda smiled. A real smile, full of hope instead of fear. "Get some rest," I said softly. "Tomorrow we start planning your future, a future where nobody gets to hurt you ever again." She closed her eyes, her breathing already deeper and more peaceful than I'd seen it all day. The monitoring equipment beeped steadily beside us, counting heartbeats, counting moments, counting the beginning of a new life. Outside the window, Los Angeles sparkled in the night, indifferent to one small family's victory over cruelty. But inside room 712, justice had been served, and healing could finally begin. 1 year later, in 2025, sunshine streamed through the kitchen window of our new house in Texas, painting golden squares across the hardwood floor, where Emma's art supplies lay scattered in organized chaos. The sound of children's laughter drifted in from the backyard, mixing with the steady rhythm of Matilda chopping vegetables for lunch. I paused in the doorway, watching my daughter move with the energy and grace that had returned month by month. Her hair had grown back, thicker than before, framing a face that glowed with health and genuine happiness. The haunted look was gone, replaced by the confident woman I'd raised, the one who'd been buried under years of Gary's manipulation. "Dad, you're lurking again," she said without turning around. That familiar teasing tone that told me everything I needed to know about her recovery. "Just appreciating the view, sweetheart. Still can't believe you're really here." Through the window, I could see Jack teaching Emma how to throw a perfect spiral, their grandfather's football techniques passed down with patient precision. At 8 and 6 now, they'd adapted to their new life with the resilience that children possess when they're finally truly safe. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Gary's threats about custody evaporated the moment his lawyer heard the recorded phone calls and saw the bank statements. A man who'd abandoned his terminally ill wife while spending her father's money on yacht parties wasn't exactly sympathetic to family court judges. "Grandpa," Emma's voice carried through the screen door. "Come show Jack how to catch better." "In a minute, honey," I called back, then turned to Matilda. "How are you feeling today? Really feeling?" She set down her knife and faced me fully, and I saw in her eyes what Dr. Rivera's tests had confirmed 3 months ago. Complete remission. I feel like myself again. Maybe better than myself. Stronger. The kitchen timer chimed, and she pulled a pan of cornbread from the oven, Martha's recipe, the one I'd taught her years ago. Some traditions were worth preserving. "Remember what you used to tell me when I was little and scared of thunderstorms?" she asked, setting the hot pan on a cooling rack. "That storms pass, but families last forever." You were right. She hugged me tight the way she used to before marriage and illness, and fear had created distance between us. About storms, about family, about Gary. I'd never said I told you so about her ex-husband, and I never would. Matilda had suffered enough without adding shame to her burdens. The restraining order spoke louder than any words I might have offered anyway. "Dad," Emma scored a touchdown. Jack burst through the screen door, grass stains on his knees, and pure joy on his face. Behind him, Emma performed an elaborate victory dance that would have made her grandmother laugh. "Touchdown celebration calls for extra cornbread," Matilda announced, cutting generous squares that steamed in the afternoon light. Later, as evening painted the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink, The four of us sat on the front porch swing that had been Martha's favorite feature of our old house, salvaged and rebuilt here where it belonged. Emma dozed against my shoulder, while Jack peppered me with questions about the stars beginning to appear overhead. "Will you tell us the story about how you saved Mom again?" Emma mumbled sleepily. "Sweetheart, your mom saved herself. I just helped clear away the obstacles. Like the bad man who went away. Like the bad man who went away." Matilda reached over and squeezed my hand, a gesture that had become our shorthand for gratitude and love, and the kind of bond that crisis either destroys or makes unbreakable. We'd chosen unbreakable. This is what winning looks like, I thought, watching my grandchildren's eyelids grow heavy in the peaceful evening. Not the moment of victory, though Gary's tearful pleading had been satisfying, but the years of quiet happiness that follow. The ordinary Tuesday evenings when nobody's fighting for their life, nobody's betraying anyone, and the only drama is whether Jack will finish his vegetables. The stars emerged one by one overhead, the same constellations Martha and I had watched from this same swing decades ago, back when Matilda was the age Emma is now. Some things change. Marriages end. People disappoint you. Illness tests every assumption about fairness. But some things endure. The love between a father and daughter, the resilience of children, the satisfaction of protecting what matters most. Tomorrow Matilda would work on her latest design project while the kids attended their new school. I'd tend the garden Martha had always wanted and maybe start that woodworking project for Emma's dollhouse. Normal life, the kind worth fighting for. Tonight, though, we sat together under the vast Texas sky. 3 generations bound by love and tested by fire, finally safe in the peace we'd earned. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.